Good morning, everyone. I'm reading today from still Dr. Erickson's material. My voice will go with you. Just finding reports that I have marked before and find interesting, helpful, stirring um, things. They're really rather exemplary and worth paying attention to and seeing how they affect our lives for working with people that we work with. This one is called Sin from um, Overcoming Habitual Limitations section. So, a young woman came to see me. She was brought up to believe that theaters are places where young girls are seduced and places of sin. She would not go into a drugstore because they sold tobacco there, and the Lord might strike her to the ground if she was in that place that dispensed tobacco. And she wouldn't drink wine or cider or any alcoholic beverage because if she did, God would strike her dead. God would strike her dead if she went to the theater. He'd strike her dead if she smoked a cigarette. I inquired about her employment. She worked for a doctor who belonged to her church. He paid her $100 per month. Erickson lived in the earlier 19, he was born in 1900, so this probably would have been around 1940, somewhere in there. The average salary at the time was $270 per month. She had worked for him for 10 years and she was still getting $100 a month. And her typing speed was no higher than 25 words per minute. She lived at home with her parents who guarded their daughter very carefully against sin. It took her an hour to get to work, 8 hours of work, sometimes overtime without pay. It took her another hour to get home, and she worked 6 days a week. She went to church on Sunday all day long. It was a very rigid and limited family. When the girl left my office after the first interview, my wife, who seldom comments on patients, said, "Who is that thing the cat dragged in?" I said, "Just a patient of mine." So I talked to the girl and I persuaded her that life is full of pitfalls and death comes to all. And if it was God's plan for her to die at a certain time, I was certain that she would not die of smoking cigarettes unless God was ready to receive her. This is old stuff. I got her to smoke a cigarette. She coughed a lot and God did not strike her dead. He really didn't. That surprised her. Then I suggested that she go to the theater. It took a couple of weeks to build up her courage. She told me very earnestly, "God will strike me dead if I turned after seeing The Lady and the Tramp." I didn't pick out that movie, so I don't know exactly what year it was, but it was a while back, as you can tell. She said, "The church must be wrong. There wasn't a thing bad in that movie. There weren't any corrupting men despoiling young girls. I think the movie was entertaining." I said, "I think the church has given you a false idea about movies. I don't think the church did it intentionally. I think the church did it out of ignorance." And she found other movies interesting, especially musicals. Then one day I told her, "I think you've improved enough to take a drink of whiskey." She said, "God will surely strike me dead." I said, "I have doubts about it. He didn't strike you dead when you went to the theater or when you smoked a cigarette. Let's see if he strikes you dead if you drink whiskey." She took a drink of whiskey and waited, and God didn't strike her dead. Then she said, "I think I've got to make some changes in my life. I think I had better move out of my parents' home and get an apartment of my own." I said, "And you need to get a better job. You need to learn how to type and move into an apartment of your own. You can't afford it, so feel free to ask your parents to pay for the apartment. And do your own cooking and rent a typewriter. As soon as you awaken in the morning, you rush to the typewriter. The very first thing and you type is This is a beautiful day in June. Then you go to the bathroom, brush your teeth, type another brief sentence, typing full speed for each sentence. Make each sentence very short. Then start dressing. Halfway through dressing, type another sentence. When you finish dressing, type another short sentence. Start getting your breakfast ready and type another short sentence. Sit down to eat, and halfway through breakfast, get up and type a short sentence. A short sentence, always typing at top speed. You can do that interrupted practice, always at full speed, and you will learn to type at a much more rapid rate. In 3 months' time, she was up to speed of 80 words a minute. As for her cooking, she said, I thought I'd make some rice and I figured I could heat a cup of rice. I put it in a pan with water. Then I had to get another pan because the cup of rice filled that big pan. And I had to get a couple of other pans. I didn't know rice swelled like that. I said, there's a lot of things to learn about cooking. I had her bake some beans. She measured that cup of beans very carefully, and they swelled into an enormous quantity. She eventually became a good cook, and she resigned from her church and told her parents, I'll come to visit you now and then. I've got a good job now. It's $270 a month, and I only have to walk 8 blocks to get to my job. Then she came to me about that time. Mrs. Erickson said to me, Milton, do you specialize in beautiful blondes? I said, the cat dragged in the last one, because that girl turned out to be very pretty. She took music lessons and enjoyed her work. Then she came to me after some months and said, Dr. Erickson, I want to get drunk and I want to know how to do it. I said, the best way of getting drunk is to give me a promise that you will not use the telephone, that you will lock your door and not unlock it, and that you will remain in your apartment. Get a bottle of wine and enjoy drinking it, sip by sip, until you have got the entire bottle drunk. She came to me within the next few days and said, I'm glad you made me promise not to use the phone because I wanted to call up all my friends and invite them to come over and get drunk with me. And that would have been terrible. And I wanted to go out into the street and sing. And I promised you that I would lock the door and wouldn't unlock it. I'm so glad that you made me promise. You know, getting drunk was fun, but I had a bad headache the next morning, a hangover. And I don't think I want to get drunk again. I said, for the joy of getting drunk, you have to pay a bill, and that is a headache, a hangover. And you are at liberty to have as many hangovers as you want. She said, I don't want any more hangovers. She later got married. Now I've lost track of her. I think it's very important to take the patient seriously and meet her wishes, not to exercise cold, hard judgment, and recognize that people need to learn things, that you really aren't competent to teach them all the things they need, that they can learn a lot on their own, and that she certainly did. And they are usually marvelously polite in trance. Here's the commentary. Get them to break prohibitions. This is one of Erickson's prime rules for treating many types of symptom complexes, including, of course, phobias and inhibitory states. First, in the outlining of the history, Erickson is careful to elicit signs of limitations, rigidities, narrow sets. Then, using the patient's own beliefs, he will set about getting them to break the prohibitions. I'll skip to another paragraph. It's a long commentary. Of course, Erickson typically, in talking about the expansion of the rice and of the beans, seeds universal ideas about expansion. In fact, the whole story can be seen as illustrating the expansion of a very small personality into a much larger one. Her income expands from $100 per month to $270 per month. Her personality blooms and her looks manifest this, so that she changes from something that the cat dragged in, quote unquote, to beautiful blonde. And the patient does find out her own limitations from experience. For example, she learns from the experience of having a hangover. Finally, Erickson gives a hint as to how he gets people to do things that they would not ordinarily consider doing. He explains they are usually marvelously polite in a trance. In putting emphasis on impulses and feeling over intellect and concepts, Erickson is merely trying to correct for the imbalance that develops in most people. As he told me once, quote, in a child, the body tries to keep up with the feet. In an adult, the feet try to keep up with the body and head. One more, it's a little more brief. It's called Reduce, Gain, and Reduce. A woman came to see me and she said, I weigh 180 pounds and I've dieted successfully under doctor's orders hundreds of times. And I want to weigh 130 pounds. Every time I get to 130 pounds, I rush to the kitchen to celebrate my success. I put it back on. Now I weigh 180. Can you use hypnosis to help me reduce to 130 pounds? I'm back to 180 for the 100th time. I told her, yes, I could help her reduce by hypnosis, but she wouldn't like what I did. She said she wanted to weigh 130 pounds and she didn't care what I did. I told her she'd find it rather painful. She said, I'll do anything to get back to 130 pounds.